Hello my dear friends and welcome to my channel. My name is Barbara and today we're going to be looking at the connection between your psychic gifts and abilities, trauma, cognitive dissonance, and spiritual awakenings. So everything that comes through in this video is based off of my own personal observations and experiences all compiled into one. So as usual, you guys can take what resonates, leave behind what does not. I'm not a psychologist and that is my disclaimer right there. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. What is the connection between all of these things? Well, first and foremost, what I do want to say starting right off the bat is that I do believe that everyone is psychic and intuitive, and it's a matter of honing in on that muscle and learning how to use it. When we see children are going to be highly open, psychic, intuitive, probably even when you guys were kids yourselves. Maybe you guys even had imaginary friends, but as time has gone on, there's a socialization aspect of it where it's like that's not real, or maybe there's fear that's been placed upon you if it comes maybe from a religious upbringing or something of the sort where it gets shut off. Now it's really interesting if you study the religious texts, this is what they are all trying to get people to achieve. Okay, that's the whole point of all of these practices. Obviously, different religious texts have different ways of going about it, but the core is there. You're trying to purify the vessel, the soul, so you can go into the higher vibrations, so you can basically get connected with maybe your higher self or whatever term you want to use. I feel like a lot of these terms are kind of getting lost in translation, but this is kind of the idea here. Okay, you are basically clearing your vessel, healing, integrating the lower chakra wounds, leaving behind those egoic desires, all of the distractions on this physical plane and this physical reality, so you can get into those high vibrations, so you can tap into the creative gifts and abilities, which is the psychic energy. Psychic energy, intuitive energy, healing energy, and spiritual energy are all very much connected, and so is sexual energy. So when we look at one of the biggest woundings on this earth plane is the sacral chakra, the sexual energy. Very interesting, right? Because then it pulls people down. But that's a different video for a different day. So I do believe that we are all already like this. Okay, we're all already like this, but as time goes on, it gets shut off. So this is why it usually takes some sort of experience to shake you up, to basically get you into the state where you're experiencing cognitive dissonance. What is cognitive dissonance? What you believe internally is not matching the physical reality. Okay, you might have some sort of belief system. Maybe your whole life people said, do this, do it this way, do it this way, and maybe you've been doing it that way, and it's like things aren't maybe panning out the way that you want them to, and then it's like it's not matching the external reality. Obviously, it's on a huge range. This is why trauma is very much connected with this, because trauma, when we look at trauma, what happens? Traumatic experiences, you basically get shot out of body. You're experiencing this huge level of cognitive dissonance. Once again, I'm not a psychologist. These are just things that I have observed personally. So you're shot out of body. And when you're shot out of body, you're then able to start tapping into the metaphysical planes. You start to see that the physical reality isn't all that there is. So it's on a range. It's really on a range. But when you have some sort of traumatic experience, boom, you go into cognitive dissonance. The worlds aren't aligning. You're starting to kind of have a shattering experience in terms of the ego. Maybe things aren't the way that I had thought. Maybe if I do things this way, it's not going to go in the way that everybody has told me my entire life. And then this is closely connected to spiritual awakenings, okay? Because then the spirit is awakened within is really what that is. And the end goal is really for all of us to really become aware that we are masters of our own reality. Again, I know that these terms really get thrown around a lot. It's like we're almost there, us as a collective, in terms of understanding what's really going on. But then we're also not, because there's a lot of holes that are there that I'm here to basically fill in for you guys. Definitely check out my metaphysical playlist. I talk about all things from a metaphysical perspective, and obviously more videos to come on these types of topics. So this is the whole connection here. So this is how basically you become psychic. You're kind of shot out of body is really what that is, because then you're kind of seeing things from a perspective that's not physical, it's metaphysical. You are shot out of body. The whole struggle here is when we look at trauma and traumatic experiences, it opens you up, maybe even prematurely. Because a lot of the time, even if we look at the ancient scriptures or any source of text, basically what they're saying is you want to purify your vessel. So a lot of the time, unfortunately, as time has gone on, a lot of things have been inverted and used as a fear tactic is really what that is. But the more you start to basically reintegrate the self is really what that is. Because the thing is, if we think about it, entering into this physical reality is a trauma of its own. I always make the joke where it's like, this is why babies cry when they're born. Anyways, it's just a joke. But it really is, if you think about it, from the beginning, right, of the entry into this physical plane, into this physical reality, it's like we're not equipped, because as a species, we've been very much stripped from a huge part of this story. There's been a lot of misinterpretations, a lot of giving your power away to people you think that know more than you. It's all within, you know, I'm sure you guys hear that a lot of the time. And even these videos are just kind of here to spark thought. So you guys kind of go off and think about it on your own and start to make your own connections with maybe all of these topics. So the whole thing here is like, once we incarnate into this physical plane, into this physical reality, from the beginning, there's some sort of trauma that's taking taking place. Because the thing is, we don't really know how things affect people. Maybe someone's a more sensitive soul. Let's say you even have twins. Maybe they have completely different personalities, and it's like one thing can be a huge traumatic experience for that particular twin. Maybe the throat chakra gets shut off. Maybe they're really excited to show a parent something. The parent ignores it. Maybe is busy to notice something like this. And then it's like you have the other twin that maybe doesn't get affected in the same way. I've actually observed this even with siblings. It's really interesting to see, like, when we look at how siblings are raised and all these sorts of things, to see maybe them having similar experiences but being affected differently. And a lot of the time you'll notice that people go into extreme polarities. Let's say they are siblings, they'll go into extreme polarities of the expression of the trauma. That's a whole different conversation for a different day. So the whole reason I'm telling you guys this is, like, you experience something traumatic, now you're open, you are now fragmented. In a way, a part of your being has left. When we're down here on this earth plane, a lot of the journey is reintegrating the self. You are reintegrating the soul, basically gathering all those aspects of yourself to yourself is really what that is, and kind of going back into that pure inner child. That's the end goal. And we have this a lot of the time when we look at ancient texts. It's all metaphor, more so rather than it being literal, but it's like you have the purification of the soul as that divine inner child that is being expressed. You can really see it in people's faces. And then we have the inversion of this, unfortunately, on this earth plane that I'm not going to get into. Some of you guys might catch my drift on what I'm talking about, but everything down here is inverted. So everything that you see, basically you have to look at it and be like, what is the opposite of that? Because the opposite of that is going to be the natural flow, the natural rhythm of us as a species. Because if you look at humans overall at their core, they're very pure. That's the whole thing. They're very good-hearted. As time goes on, people kind of start to shut that inner child off. They kind of become very jaded based off of their experiences, maybe even cynical. You start to kind of lose that inner spark. And I do believe that this is why a lot of the time people love children and they love having children, because it's like it kind of reconnects them to that inner child. But it's like you can do this for yourself. And that's kind of that purification of the soul. You're going back into that inner child. And you'll see, a lot of the time you will see how individuals are expressing that wounded inner child. And it's interesting because sometimes I even think to myself and I'm like, are we all just walking around as an expression of the wounded inner child trying to heal itself? Anyways, a question to ask ourselves. The whole reason I'm telling you guys all of this in terms of the trauma and the reintegration, all these sorts of things, because it's like when you open psychically and you are now open to the metaphysical world, or rather you are reopen to it, because I do believe that once again, when we are younger, we are very much highly connected. It gets shut off. So you're now reintroduced to the psychic world, to the metaphysical planes. Now when this happens, if you have a traumatic experience that has taken place, it's pulling you down. So this is how people can go into paranoia, you know, where it's like we talk about this, let's say even with Scorpio energy. Scorpio energy in the shadow can very much go into paranoia because they're psychically open. A lot of traumatic experiences have taken place, and it's like they're going into paranoia because they're kind of trying to self-preserve themselves so they don't experience maybe a certain traumatic thing once again. A good indicator to know where the trauma is being reactivated within your body is when you get triggered. The trigger is basically showing you the area where you need to heal. So that's the whole thing here. It's like if you're in the lower vibrations or just like the lower emotions, because of the new age, and it's great that people are getting in tune with these things, but a lot of these terms are starting to sound like catchphrases when people are like, oh, get into the higher vibrations or high vibe. The whole meaning here, the whole thing that we're trying to achieve is the reintegration of the lower vibrations. And the lower vibrations are your lower emotions, shame, guilt. It's going to be fear, anger, survival mode. So you really want to basically transmute is the word that I'm looking for. Transmute these lower emotions, lower energies within yourself so you can start to go into the higher chakras. So that's the whole thing with the chakras. And this is why, let's say you type into Google and it's like third eye chakra. One of the first things that's going to pop up is going to be like, don't open your third eye chakra. And there's going to be all this fear information about it. And it's like, there's no fear here. The whole thing to understand is like, if you do prematurely open one of your psychic gifts and it's like you're not grounded or you're not ready to receive that information, you can go into maybe a fear aspect of it. And because you're in the fear aspect of it, it's pulling you into maybe the lower vibrations or being open to darker entities. And it's like when the darker energy might latch onto you, it can basically make you spiral. This is why a lot of the time, at least my own theory, this is just a theory, a lot of the time people who have a wounding in the sacral chakra, this is going to be on a huge range. Sacral chakra deals with your sexuality, psychic gifts and abilities, your emotions, the vulnerability, the codependencies are in here. When you do experience a wounding in the chakra, you can go into addictions. And if you look at the collective as a whole, there is some sort of wounding within everybody in one way, shape, or form. And there is some sort of addiction in one way, shape, or form. Again, addiction is on a range, so it's connected to the sacral chakra. It's pulling you down into this chakra. I always talk about the 3 biggest wounds on this earth plane. I actually have added a 4th one in there since then. I should probably make a video by this point, really going in detail in terms of the woundings in the chakras. Is going to be root, sacral, solar plexus, and actually your heart chakra. In the heart chakra, there's a lot of grief. A lot of this has been coming to the surface in these past few years where people are purging grief out of the heart space. And really briefly, in the root chakra, we're going to have survival wounds. We're going to have the fear of death. That's a huge one that people are basically controlled by. fear in general, anything that puts you into that animal-like state, that beast-like state, that is kind of the lower version of the human. We have evolved past that. Otherwise, we would have incarnated as animals, if you think about it. Anything to do with finances is in here. Anything to do with safety, security. This is a big one. Okay, so this is a huge wound in the collective. I'm not here to say which one's bigger, which one's smaller. These are just patterns that personally I've observed throughout the collective as wounds. That's going to be the root chakra. Then we have the sacral chakra, as I've mentioned already in this video. Your sexuality is in here. We have hypersexualization, repression of sexuality, huge conflicting energy within. This is the feminine energy within. That is the sacral chakra. At least that's the way that I see it. Again, you guys can take it if it resonates and leave it behind if it does not. As I mentioned, the codependencies are in here, emotions, vulnerability. So if you're struggling with any of these things, there's a wound in the sacral chakra in one way, shape, or form. Then we have the solar plexus. Solar plexus, this is going to be your ego. The ego desires can be in here. This is actually your identity overall. You want to have a healthy ego. That's the thing. Everyone's going to have an ego, you know, and you can't not have one while we are down here, because it's like your ego is what identifies things, is going to say that's a plant, you know, that's a tree, that's your ego. The thing is, and again, this goes along with a lot of the religious scriptures, the original ones at least, it's like the ego desires can also pull you down, where it's like you're not listening to the heart space, you're listening to the ego desires. That's the whole thing in terms of balancing the ego. That's kind of what we're trying to actually achieve, is having a healthy ego, having a mature ego, catching it, knowing maybe when it's holding you back, knowing maybe when you guys are going too much into the comfort zone, because the ego is going to try to keep you safe. It's going to try to keep you comfortable. It's going to maybe add resistance when you're trying to do something new. It's going to always come up with these excuses where it's like, oh, don't go to that event. It's so warm and cozy in your house and it's raining outside, like whatever it is. Now, when we have a huge shadow happening on the solar plexus chakra, you can actually go into narcissism, narcissistic traits. Not everyone is a narcissist on this plane, but the plane has been very narcissistic up until this point. This is really important to understand. So everyone has a version of this trait within them, or the traits. So that is going to be your solar plexus chakra. The abandonment wound is a big one in here. I find solar plexus and sacral are highly connected. It's all about balancing these two within, because it's like if you're triggered with your abandonment wound, it's very existential, which by the way, I need to do a video on that as well. The existentialism, I've mentioned this in a lot of videos. That's what it's connected to, because it's like when your identity is not being validated, it's kind of like connected to your existence. You don't feel like you exist. That's why a lot of the time you'll find that people are always finding people who are like them, because it is validating you as a person. And the whole thing here is like, this is why people get into conflicts. They hold a belief so deeply, okay? Because it's like when a person is not validating your belief, it's kind of like they're not validating your existence. So that's a little bit on existentialism and how it's connected to the abandonment wounds and how you want to overcome that. Because at the end of the day, every soul has a path. I truly believe that. We come down here and there's kind of like a box, a cookie cutter way of being, and not every soul's path is meant to fit into that. Maybe it's going to happen at different times for people. Maybe people are meant to have different types of lifestyles, whatever it is. And this is why astrology is amazing, because it's going to tell us the whole blueprint that the soul might have. So this is the whole thing with the solar plexus sacral situation with the abandonment wound. A lot of the time, because the abandonment wound is leading people, they're going to end up in situations where they might do things to satisfy the community that they are a part of, or the family, or the parents. It always starts with the original two caregivers. That wound is so big, okay? The abandonment wound, it's like if you feel like your existence isn't being validated, once again, it's kind of like you don't exist, and it's very closely connected to the fear of death. So that's the whole thing there. I'm sure I'm giving you guys a lot to think about in this video, but that's really what's going on there. And it's like, this is what holds people back. And then it's kind of like we get trapped into that loop of coming back because you didn't really get to complete what you wanted to do, on a soul level, and all these things. So that's the solar plexus. And then the heart chakra, like I mentioned, we have the grief going on. So the whole thing is here, if you have any of these wounds and you're psychically open, you really have to watch yourself, because it's like you have psychics sometimes, and no hate to people, and you know, everyone's, I guess, trying to get their bag, especially in the times that we're living in. But you have those psychics that are kind of like, oh, this is gonna happen to your family if you don't give me $1,000 to buy this candle. It's really important to understand that you can literally create anything and protect anyone with your mind. That's the whole thing here to understand. Nobody outside of you can really help you in any type of way. You know, we can all inspire each other and have conversations and all these wonderful things, but it's like if these people are coming around and they're like, spend this much money or buy this thing and I'll save you and I'll protect you. We're coming out of that era. That was very much the shadow of the age of Pisces. So that's what I mean by integrating the lower chakra wounds, because it's like, let's say that individual is maybe psychically open, but they are taking advantage of individuals because of their gifts. And then now it's because they themselves maybe have a scarcity mindset, or there's a money wound, or maybe they're greedy. Another thing really to understand, and I've really been thinking about this lately, is like, honestly, like in terms of money and abundance, if you really do go into the trusting energy and the surrendering energy, you're always going to have exactly what you need when you need it. if you are in the trusting state, which actually takes a lot of work to get to. And again, it's easier said than done because it's like the way everything is down here, it's all about anxiety, right? You're always like, oh, well, how am I going to pay the next thing? And I have to pay for this. It's all future thinking. So it's a matter of inner work to actually get there. It's a challenge. I kind of hope you guys are following what I mean when I say, like, you know, you have this prematurely opened gift now, but there's wounds that have to be integrated. Otherwise it goes into the shadow aspects of that particular gift. So this is on a range. Like I mentioned earlier, you can go into paranoia energy if you might think this is evil or demonic and you're psychically open. So this is why these experiences, the lower chakra wounds, have to basically be integrated so you can go into the divine version of the psychic gifts and abilities, which really is to be creative, to be in those high pure vibrations, and you're anchoring and eventually really getting to the point where it's like you think it and it happens. But that takes a while because there's a lot of things up until this point. There's a lot of things that have been wounded and it's been passed down, and generational things, which by the way, generational things that have been passed down are also stored in the root chakra. So this is the whole thing here in terms of you have some sort of experience where the external is not matching the internal belief systems, maybe beliefs, maybe upbringing, XYZ. And honestly, it can be on a huge range. It's not matching. So you go into cognitive dissonance, boom, you're shot out of body because it's like your reality is not matching, right? And again, you know, when people experience this, they can really go once again into cognitive dissonance where it's like they might attack, you know, the external energy because again, it's existentialism. It's not validating their internal reality. But if you push through, which honestly is hardcore, but it is what it is. If you push through and you do the work and you do the inner work, you're able to go into those higher vibrations, and it is rewarding in the end. It's just going to be a lot of inner work that basically takes you there. Now, another thing that also I want to mention in this video is the connection with spiritual awakening. So, you know, in these past few years, a lot more people have been awakening spiritually. I kind of even want to call it a reawakening. It's not so much like an awakening that wasn't already there. It's something that got shut off as time went on. But like I was saying at the beginning of this video, I do want to at least believe that as humans at the core, we are already like this. We're already psychic and intuitive. It's just a matter of tapping into these gifts. So what I want to mention in this video about spiritual awakenings is that when you go through an awakening, there are levels to it and there are layers to it because you're also yourself going through the different vibrations. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard 3D, 4D, 5D, going out of 3D into 5D. The consciousness is basically breaking out of the constructs of the physical reality that we have been in. I'm going to have to talk a little bit in code here. So what happens is as you are breaking through, you are breaking through even more and more layers of deception. There's a lot of deception down here. Even when you have maybe that initial spiritual awakening, you can eventually have maybe another awakening every time you discover some sort of new information or something new about yourself, or maybe something that was holding you back, or in general about the world and the way the world operates. You're going to go through a spiritual awakening because certain individuals are highly aware that this is going to be taking place and continuing to take place. They want to kind of hold their position. So as you're kind of breaking through this, there's going to be a lot of deception. This is going to have to be a different video for a different day. I'm just kind of planting the seed in this video because I know I've given you guys a lot of information already, and this is kind of how we fall into that whole energy where people talk about false prophets. So discernment is really, really important. That's all I'm really going to say here because it's like different things are going to resonate for everybody. But the highest truth of all, I really at least feel, is going to be the love vibration, is going to be the heart vibration. Whatever resonates in your heart and your heart space, and it resonates in your soul. You really feel it. This is the thing, and people have been so disconnected from their emotions and their feeling. They've been taken out of the heart space into the shadow of the solar plexus, which is the ego. That's the whole thing here. So that's the conflict that people are usually experiencing most of the time, if you think about it, because the soul is always trying to pull you into the direction that the soul wants to go. Then there's the mind or the logic or the ego, whatever term you want to use, that's kind of pulling you in the other direction, into the safety direction, into the direction of acceptance. So anytime you're experiencing that pull, the soul is always pulling you. And kind of what's happening during the times that we're living in is that gap is getting too big between soul wants to do this and ego wants to do this. It's getting too big. Before, maybe people could have even lived double lives and these types of things where it's like they're kind of appeasing the people around them, but the soul's kind of doing what it wants to do. Now it's like it's too big. It's kind of like you're either coming into the soul's direction, the heart space is what the heart really wants to do, or you're going into the ego direction, and you can really feel it. You can feel things within the body when you get in tune with the emotions and that emotional body. You can feel when things are either right and they're kind of going in the direction that they're meant to be going. It kind of feels smoother, easier. Everything kind of happens faster when it's kind of meant to be happening. Or if it's kind of like you're going an uphill battle and you're kind of fighting against maybe what it is that the soul wants to do, it feels like an uphill battle. You know, it feels like a struggle and you're tired and maybe you're even burnt out. Another thing that I was thinking about recently was when you're in alignment with your soul's path, you never feel burnt out, because it's like, because of the fact that you're so in alignment with what it is that's on a heart resonance and you feel like you should be doing this, it's like, it's higher vibrational. Like you can be working the entire day, you know what I mean? But it's like, again, if you're doing something you're not meant to do, you experience burnout because you're not meant to be doing that thing. Overall, this is the whole idea here, okay? So the huge connection between psychic gifts, trauma, spiritual awakenings, and cognitive dissonance. In the simplest of terms, you experience something traumatic that shakes you out of your slumber, shakes you out of body, and you kind of leave even for a second. You see things from a higher perspective and you get reawakened, basically is what that is, and in tune with those gifts and abilities that everyone has. I do believe that everybody has these gifts and abilities. It's just a matter of becoming aware of them and once again healing. I always bring everything back to this. All of my videos, I'm always going to say to you guys, it's all about healing the lower chakra wounding. It's really all about trying to catch when that ego might be coming up, because sometimes, even like, let's say something's done, it's a job, it's a relationship, it's a friendship, sometimes the ego wants to hold on. Safety, comfort, existentialism, any of these things really, and it's like you're holding on to them, and it's like the universe kind of gives you the option where it's like, okay, you're either gonna let this thing go, or I'm gonna shake up your whole world, which is the Tower moment in the tarot, and it really forces you to come out of that, because it's just, again, it's the times that we're living in, the vibrations are high, so even more shadows are coming to the surface to be healed and integrated. So I think I said all I wanted to say, at least for this video now. I'm sure I gave you guys a lot of information to think about. Please do like, share, and subscribe, and I hope you all have a beautiful rest of the day.